Education has been my top priority here. The biggest change maker is the community colleges. And when I first got elected, I was sort of horrified to learn that the average student spent 6 years in community college. And there's been a very decades-long effort to try to improve basic skills. We were able to get $60 million in the budget to look at high-impact practices to accelerate students' journey through community college, whether it's to get a vocational degree in 2 years or to transfer to a 4-year college.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today we're glad to be joined again by Assemblywoman Jacqui Irwin. Jacqui, thanks for joining us. Great to see you in person this time.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm glad we're not doing this over Zoom.
No, definitely not. I remember last time you were just coming in from a hike, so glad to see you here in person today. And kind of tell us a little bit, what's changed in the last 2 years with you and your district?
Well, we obviously had redistricting, and a lot of legislators saw big changes, but I would say I saw one of the biggest changes. The district that I'm representing now is probably 60% different than the district that I had before.
That's a big change.
So I had Oxnard and Hueneme, basically a significant portion of Ventura County and about 5% of LA County. And then I added the cities of Simi and all the way out to Camarillo, and then Malibu and Brentwood and Pacific Palisades and Bel Air.
District, huh?
Yes, so it has completely changed, a whole different constituency. But we're going to work really hard to learn all about all our new constituents,
right.
And it's going to be exciting.
What are I guess the interests of your constituents? Like what has changed there? Like what's front of mind? You just ran for re-election. You've gone door to door. You've talked to these new people. What's front of mind on kind of some of the issues they want to see you kind of tackle up here?
Well, I think the biggest issue is that I'm representing a very significant portion of the Santa Monica Mountains, and communities like Malibu and Thousand Oaks and Oak Park and Agora have all been impacted by fire. And so they're very concerned about climate change. They're very concerned to make sure that the state invests enough money to protect them from fires. So we also have constituents that have seen their fire insurance bills go way up. We're going to be working with the insurance commissioner to see if we can do something to help kind of alleviate the burden that a lot of these homeowners are seeing. Yeah,
no, that's tough because a lot of these places become uninsurable. And
yes.
Then what do you do?
Yeah, well, what we're seeing with, and it's especially difficult for the townhome communities because they are not covered by or they can't be fully covered by the state insurance. So they are lining up, a number of different insurance companies to try to get coverage. But we're hoping to be able to help there. We had a huge fire, the Thomas fire, Woolsey fire in that area, and they have seen firsthand the devastation that these huge fires bring. Obviously, in Malibu, we lost a large number of homes. So we really want to make sure that homeowners do everything they can do to protect themselves from fires, but also to make sure that they can still get reasonable insurance.
We just recently had this flood of storms statewide, really crushed kind of, I guess, the northern area of the state here on the coast. How did your area fare during this kind of series of storms?
We didn't see huge issues in our area. The area the Santa Monica Mountains that in my district does have a number of canyons. People drive through Canaan and Topanga, and there were definitely minor rock slides in those areas where they needed to get the boulders removed out of the center of the road. But just up north a little, obviously, there was a huge issue because of the mudslides.
Right.
Yeah. Or so potential mudslides.
We just had a group of a new influx of new legislators. One time not too long ago, you were one of those new legislators. What's it kind of like getting to know the new group and kind of getting started this session with kind of all this new energy?
Well, it's exciting, but it's also difficult to say goodbye to so many of the colleagues that we've worked with for a long time. This was when people ask that, they say, "Oh my gosh, there's 20 or 25 new legislators. That must be so difficult." But when we had 6-year term limits, this
Right.
is what was happening every 2 years. So it does show that we are in a much better situation with the 12-year term limits. We've really seen that legislators have been able to dig into their policy areas. It used to be, I think, the average legislator served 3.5 years because they were on to the next office very quickly. So it is fun to get to know all these new legislators with their new priorities. But it's my staff has put together a big picture chart, so I can get to know all of them.
Learn all the new names.
To learn all the new names, but it seems like a great group. They seem to be pretty tight knit, and the members that have been here a while are trying to get to know as many of them as possible. So I have invited them to. We do morning walks one day,
Right.
and last week I did. Invited a few to Orange Theory, and this week we're going to be doing spin, and we have our regular Pilates class. So that's a good way to get to know some of our legislators, but we're also trying to fit into their schedules to be able to talk to them one-on-one.
Yeah.
They're at the point right now with the 115-minute meetings, so they're pretty overwhelmed too.
So I guess you're the chairwoman of the active caucus then,
Yeah.
Which one of these new members is the best athlete that you've seen so far?
I probably, I don't know if I would want to opine
Still
on
assessing.
that. Yeah, I'm still assessing, but they're definitely very excited to be involved. And when I first started here, there was the big joke that everybody gained the freshman 15, and then I think it went up to the freshman 20. And so we're trying to avoid that. So we're scaring all of them,
Right.
telling them they better be exercising.
That's funny. Like pre-COVID, there used to be so many receptions, like beginning of the year receptions. And, we were recently talking about this is what's the biggest change? And, that I think that's the biggest change is members would go out and go to 5 to 10 events a night, right? And now it's really slowed down and kind of moderated. So putting on that freshman 15 is a little more difficult than it used to be.
But I do think that you're really starting to see things move. I mean, we've had some difficulties because a lot of, our businesses with COVID have had real difficulties, and a lot of them have shut down. So that does slow things down a little bit. But I can see that things are picking up pretty rapidly now. Some people just think COVID's over, so it's time. But I think the receptions and those type of gatherings will get started again. But it has been, 2 or 3 years where things have been very slow. And I was just joking with Kevin McCarty. We were just talking during COVID. There was nobody here except for the legislators. Right. So we would take walks like at night twice a week. And our first trip was through the cemetery. And so we have a lot of fond memories of that really terrible time, but we made the most of it. But, looking forward to getting back to normal.
Yeah. The governor just came out with his budget proposal, kind of his blueprint for what's going on for later in this year. Have you had a chance to take a look at it, and kind of what are some of your initial thoughts about kind of the changes in revenue and kind of the spending outlay from this year, from last year?
I haven't looked at it that carefully. Obviously, I'm not on the budget committee. I do think, we already thought last year that was a very unique year with the stock market being so high during COVID and all the federal money that we were getting, that it was, it seemed like the budget was maybe a once in a lifetime budget. And this year it's, everything is slowing down. We depend, as everybody knows, a lot on the top tax earners in the state, and with the stock market down, you definitely see a difference there. So kind of waiting to see what the May revise looks, seeing what the projections look like. But we have every indication that there's not going to be a whole lot of money, and that cuts will have to be made I really think that we shouldn't dig very deep into that rainy day fund because we don't know if there's going to be a recession looming or not.
Right.
So I certainly hope that the governor and the legislature, when it finally gets to be June, that we have a conservative budget, that we preserve all our important safety net programs, but that we always also realize that there could be an ongoing issue.
Right. You've been reappointed chairwoman of Assembly Revenue and Tax. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Kind of what drew you to that committee, and kind of what do you like about being the chair of that committee?
I was just appointed. I think I haven't even been in a year, so we didn't really have a full year in that committee yet, but I think it's interesting to see what you can do with the tax code to help the those that need the most help. So something that I've been particularly focused on is how do we get EITC out to more of our constituents. That's a program that brings the working poor out of poverty, and it is being underutilized. So we have looked at a number of ways that we might be able to expand utilization of that. It's also important to look at, what is it that we can do to help businesses through the tax code. And then, of course, we always have a lot of colleagues that suggest that it's time for tax increases.
Right.
But we will be looking at those very carefully. I think we had a huge budget last year. We need to see where we're going. Something that I'm pretty skeptical about.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of areas we can look at and see, like I said, either helping further goals like helping the poor, or what can we do for climate change, and supporting businesses. So it should be an exciting year in Rev and Tax, as exciting as Rev and Tax can be.
Exactly. Is there anything, like, since you've taken over the committee and you've really dug into, I guess, the California tax code, kind of what are some of the more, I guess, interesting things or some things that kind of stood out to you since kind of digging into this?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, everybody wants to give tax credits, and I think it's quite amazing how much of our budget is actually tax credits or tax refunds. So that's the part I think has been for a very long time hidden, that we can't spend as much money in the budget as we want because we have so many of these tax rebates in place. Luckily, a few years ago, we had, I think it was an assembly member at the time that made sure that there were phase outs of those taxes, but we're going to be having an oversight hearing to really try to get an idea of how big the issue is, because something that might make sense right now, encouraging, for instance, investment in, batteries or solar infrastructure, something like that's relevant, might not be relevant in a few years, and expenditures that we had 20 years ago might not be relevant. So I think it's time to take a look at that.
Yeah. I guess one of the kind of the coolest things that's happened the last couple of years is the work a lot of your colleagues have done with community colleges, and especially giving funding, kind of basically making it free for a lot of people to go to community college. Kind of, can you tell us about your work with community colleges, kind of what you've been doing with AB 1705?
Certainly, and education has been my top priority here. We've worked all the way from starting a early childhood education program at Cal State Channel Islands, a pilot program for like a lab school, getting an engineering school there, and all the way through getting funding for UC Innovation Centers. But I think the biggest change maker is the community colleges. And when I first got elected, I was sort of horrified to learn that the average student spent 6 years in community college. And there's been a very, decades-long effort to try to improve basic skills. So we had a hearing down in the district at Channel Islands looking at what had been done. And basically all those basic skill programs had been a failure. They really hadn't moved the ball at all to getting students through community college earlier. So we were able to get $60 million in the budget to look at high impact practices to accelerate students' journey through community college, whether it's to get a vocational degree in 2 years or to transfer to a to transfer to a 4-year college. And it turns out after that investment, when you saw certain schools really embrace it, that the biggest issue was that the placement tests were putting students, the vast majority of students, in remedial education. And when you looked a little deeper in the numbers, students that were 2 or 3 levels below, especially in the community college in my area, only 25% of them ever took a transfer level class. Now, if you really take a step back, you realize how shameful that is. I represent an area that has a lot of first-gen students. Mm-hmm. Here are students whose parents did not go to college that decided to sign up for community college, and then they drop out because they were in remedial. And it turns out remedial doesn't help success in transfer level classes at all. So 705 passed in, I think it was 2017, and that required that students be placed, in most cases, directly into transfer level classes. And what we saw with the PPIC report that came out a few years later is that tens of thousands of students moved through the system more quickly. And there were, some colleges that were reluctant and skeptical of that data, but we work with the chancellor's office and a number of equity groups to close some of the loopholes, and that's what 1705 was. It's not just about those first-gen students that are being placed in remedial because they don't have the confidence to say, I want to be in a transfer level class. Every time I go and talk to people that are in the fellows program, the cream of the crop, young people, they tell me stories about being stuck in remedial. I talked to 2 young women right when we were in the midst of this fight that had been placed in remedial and had to take 18 units per semester to get out of community college in 2 years, and then they both graduated from Cal with honors. So obviously that placement was wrong. So I think this is a huge game changer for our students, and it really helps them move onto the next phase of where they want to go more quickly.
Right. Cal State Channel Islands. That's not one that gets a lot of publicity, but I guess it should be. Where exactly is it? Is it on an island, or is it just?
Oh, yeah, it should be with a name like that. Yeah. No, it's kind of overlooking the islands, and they do have a lab on Santa Rosa. So Cal State Channel Islands is in Camarillo, and it's one of the newest Cal States. Yeah. And beautiful campus, and it's almost like getting a private education there right now, but very involved with the community and with the business community, and that's kind of how we decided that we needed to help them get the funding for an engineering school, because there was a survey done in the community, and it turns out the local businesses and the naval base were in desperate need of engineers. So they started a mechatronics program with some funding that we were able to get them. And last year was their first graduating class. And it was so exciting to hear that every one of those students was snapped up. And so at least, we really feel like you made a difference, that we really feel like we made a difference at that school.
It's like everyone apply now before it gets too popular, like Cal Poly and all the San Diego schools and Santa Barbara.
It's like our secret little gem there, and a very large number of first-gen students from Ventura County. So we just want to make sure that they're, get a good education and are able to stay in the area.
Yeah, I was just recently at an event, and all the, there was maybe 15 members there, and everyone was just talking about housing. I got to get a housing bill, this housing bill. And it seems like we've just been exhausted with housing talk it seems like, I guess, since Gavin was elected, that's what he came out and talked about. You live in a district where everyone wants to live. We'd all love to move there if we could. How do you deal with that? We only have so much space. There's only, so many spots to build housing. Kind of what's some of your thoughts to kind of really deal with this housing crunch and kind of address some of these housing issues everyone keeps, talking about?
Well, and I'll talk specifically about Ventura County because the LA portion of my district is, of course, something I've been representing for, just 2 months. So it's a little bit difficult to really talk about that area. Ventura County is very they really value open space, and there's been a number of voter initiatives to protect our ag land. And if you look at each individual city, they are really trying to protect open space too. So we already know those are the values of the residents of Ventura County, but each of the cities really needs to take on a responsibility to look at, if you're not going to build an open space, which I don't think you should, where can you put additional density? And the cities are really stepping up. They don't like to be told by the state what to do. They especially were not happy with bills like SB 9, these local cities. But the city that I live in Thousand Oaks, is building, I think they have 6 new high density projects on what would be considered the downtown corridor. And you're seeing that in more cities like Moore Park also. So they are really taking on the responsibility, but they're doing it in a way that really fits the locals.
Right.
So it's really about local control in those areas. I think that especially the elected officials realize in Ventura County we've had extremely anemic economic growth, and that can be attributed to not building enough housing. So we're really starting to see things turn around. But again, that's within the parameters of what people accept, which is, understanding that we need to put density in the areas where you already see building.
Right. No, interesting. Last year in last year's budget, you had something in there called digital upskilling. What is that?
Well, during COVID, what we saw is that the people that had the skills to stay home were able to work from home and make their regular salaries or make more than their regular salaries. And then we saw a lot of the lower income workers that still had to go into work, put their own life in danger with the pandemic,
right.
And they weren't necessarily getting paid a lot. And a lot of them are in jobs that eventually kind of dead-end jobs.
Right.
And so what we had talked about as a small group here in the legislature is we really needed to get more people trained up into jobs that will help them become part of this economy where they can make more money, where they have much more upward mobility, as opposed to being, phased out by automation or being in dead-end jobs.
Right.
And so I was able to get $5 million in the budget for a pilot project in Ventura County. We worked with a number of groups, including the Economic Development Corporation, and they were able to hire a couple of staff. And what they did was they interviewed all the local companies to look at what are the skills you're hiring for. And because you're seeing help wanted signs everywhere, but it wasn't matching the skills that some of the people that were out of work or underemployed. So we're starting this big. We have the survey results. We know what the skills are that are required, and we have right now 3 cohorts of people that are going to be trained up, let's say in cloud computing or even how to turn on a computer and do a spreadsheet. They're going to be getting salary replacements. They are going to be getting a computer, and they're going to be getting free training and then a connection to jobs in the local area. And this is really something that we need to look at across California and really across the United States. How do we make sure that people have constant education? Because many of the jobs that we see now are going to be phased out. And how can you train people in areas that have this high need? I see a company right near us that has had a sign up for the last year that we will pay to train you, and they can't get anybody to take the job, and yet you have people that are sitting in minimum wage jobs and not able to really live comfortably. They're not able to own a house. They're are food insecure. So we really need to look at what can we do. And this is not about college students. This is really about 25 and up people that find that they're in careers that are not paying much anymore.
That's interesting because we just had Luz Rivas on, and she has the engineering background. here you are with your engineering background. Kind of interesting. You don't really see a lot of members with engineering backgrounds. And here we are 2 in a row. And one of the things you talked about was kind of in high school, like there's not a lot of technical education. Like coding is like something that a lot of people are trying to get into, a huge demand. Is that something that, I guess you think that needs to be addressed, I guess, in high school or even community college, just a little more technical education?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that are trying to bring it into the high schools. We've seen programs in Ventura County that are going into the high schools to try to teach coding. What I'm really heartened to see is when you have these robotics tournaments. They have some of them just aimed completely at young women, and I met one of them recently, and she just graduated with some masters in engineering. So we really need to. It's really important for both women and for people that are underrepresented in the technical fields to have early exposure, because it makes it much more likely that they will think that they can pursue one of those fields. But it's absolutely critical, because that's the job. You hear right now, it seems people might have a little skepticism because we're hearing about the layoffs from these tech companies in some of the technical jobs. But what you're not hearing, unless you're really listening, is that a lot of those folks are getting hired up right away by hospitals or by insurance companies, because it's just, we have just a shortage across every field of technical people. And for me, I really think there's a big opportunity in cybersecurity too. We're like a million positions short in cybersecurity. Wow. And you can get that training in the local community college. You can go full on in a cybersecurity direction in Cal State or any of the other UC colleges. But it's a field that it's not just working at Google where you can get a job in software engineering or cybersecurity. It's at your local bank down the street.
Exactly. No, that's interesting. You've always been kind of at the forefront of a lot of things kind of tech related here in the legislature. Kind of what are some of the issues kind of coming up this year that, the tech companies are looking at?
Well, obviously, I think the biggest responsibility for the state is making sure that we are training enough engineers, software folks, enough people in the technical fields at our Cal States and UCs and at the community colleges. I would say that's one of the biggest things. Most of what I've been working on in the last 8 years is making sure that our state government is doing what it needs to do as far as doing security assessments and audits. And we've seen a huge, a definite improvement here with Department of Technology. A lot of the departments are much more aware, and we saw a big investment from both Governor Brown and Governor Newsom in putting something together that really acknowledges the danger that the state faces in the cybersecurity area. But what I see this year, and you're hearing more and more about it, is that with these smaller government organizations, smaller schools, they are not able to really get the expertise to hire the right type of person to protect themselves. And then even really more scary is critical infrastructure. And we need to make sure that, that at both the federal level and the state level, that they are getting these small, let's say water companies or or big electric companies are doing everything they can to protect their infrastructure and the people they serve.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We just kind of saw this over the Christmas break, right? Where Southwest had some like outdated IT infrastructure, and then, even the U.S. transportation system had this old COBOL system. That's what a lot of our agencies have, right?
Right.
What is it going to take to kind of update kind of these systems to get us, I guess, to the standards of today? So,
yeah, it's hard for those state systems because they're so enormous. We, they all have these legacy systems that were from like the 60s. And so the question is, do you start over or keep patching them? And with Southwest, that's neither one of these issues are not necessarily the security issues, but just that brand new, that you really almost have to start from scratch. I think the Southwest, they just have a very complicated situation because it's point to point as opposed to a hub system that other airlines do, and the software just wasn't able to handle the stress that it received when there were so many cancellations because the weather was so much larger. So they have known that they needed to upgrade their system, but we have the same thing in the state of California. EDD has a system that before the pandemic, we had oversight hearings. They said that their system needed to be upgraded. We were specifically concerned about the fact that they couldn't get the Social Security numbers out of the correspondence that they sent, which was very disturbing. But they said, no, we have to, the new system's going to be up in, 2024. But then you saw what really happened when that investment wasn't there. The system was not delivering during COVID.
And abused, right? Like a lot of fraud.
There was a lot of fraud too. So I think we just have to be much more proactive. But the thing with cybersecurity and with these software systems is everybody is, after the fact, they think it's an emergency, but we really need to think about proactively investing. And that's not quite as exciting for legislators. It's not a ribbon cutting for a new bridge. It's something that you invest because you're trying to prevent a big cyber attack, or you're trying to prevent a EDD from melting down during during a pandemic where thousands of people were not getting their checks and weren't able to eat.
Right. No, yeah. It always blows my mind that here we are in California, the home of all these companies that you think could just solve our problems like this. And yet here we are kind of with these antiquated systems. So it's ironic.
It is difficult because you have to go back. I think California is now the fourth largest economy in the world. And so these software systems that run, a lot of our different departments are absolutely enormous. And it is, for a company to bid on it, is highly risky because of the liability and the complexity. And so there is really, they're starting in Department of Technology, has started to use this agile system, which is taking a system and building it in parts and allowing different RFPs. So allowing smaller companies to also bid on building up systems. And hopefully they continue with that because that's something that makes much more sense for a state that has an economy as enormous as most other countries, as enormous as more enormous than all but I guess three.
A few, yeah. No, that's something. You live in Thousand Oaks, and Thousand Oaks is known as probably one of the safest places in California to live. Yet, despite that, you had an issue of violence, not too long ago. Gun, safety and gun control has been, a priority of yours over the past years. Obviously we had another shooting yesterday, but, it kind of seems like everyone wants to do more and more and more. You guys are looking to do more, but, what really can be done? Because it seems like, despite all our best efforts, this, keeps happening.
It is, to hear the news yesterday morning when I woke up, it's so tragic, especially after we went through borderline in Thousand Oaks. The scar that is left on the community never disappears. 10 people dead. At borderline, it was 12. Everybody knew somebody who knew somebody. Everybody had a child that was, just about to go there or had been there the previous week at borderline. And this was the same place, someplace that they were meeting other people and they were dancing and they were enjoying life. And then it was just, beyond tragic what happened. So here in California, we always talk about what can we do. The fact is that we really need this at the federal level. We need more action. What I worked on after borderline is to look at what can we do given what California's already done. And the two areas that we saw that we could do more work was tightening up the gun violence restraining orders. And so we did bills some of them making it easier to get a GVRO. But the other thing is most people don't know that you can utilize one.
Right.
And so it's very important that the word gets out there that if you have a family member that you think that has a gun and that you think is going to potentially put other people in danger, you can go and petition the court to have those guns taken away. And I think that would make a big difference in a lot of situations. So we're going to be revisiting that again. We want to make sure we've passed a bill to make sure that every department, sheriff's and police department, puts together policies on GVROs and engages the public to make sure that they know that that's going on. The other thing is we have this great program called the APPS program, which is basically, it's a list of felons that are not allowed to have guns, domestic violence abusers convicted that are not allowed to have guns, but the list keeps growing. Right. And so we were able to get money in the budget to, usually these guns are taken away by the Attorney General's office. So we wanted to make sure that they had all the help that they could use, and we gave grants to 4 local departments because the locals often have a much easier time removing guns from criminals that are in that area or people that have been convicted that aren't allowed to have guns. They know the neighborhoods, often they know the families. Right. And so that program was very successful, and we were able to get, again, additional $10 million in funding, and that has been spread out among the Attorney General spread it out among a number of other departments. And so we really want to look at the numbers. To me, it seems obvious that the local law enforcement can be a force multiplier to help the Attorney General remove those guns. But I think it's these people are not allowed to have guns and they should be removed. But I think, we see already in California that we have the strictest laws and we have the lowest per capita number of deaths from gun violence. So what we really need is, I'm not sure how much more we can do here, but besides really enforcing the laws that we have. But again, we need to lobby to do more at the federal level.
Mm-hmm. We got some deadlines coming up here. The beginning of the year, we have the bill introduction deadline coming. How's your package looking this year? How many bills are you looking to carry, and what are some of the areas you're looking to attack here this year?
Well, we had last year, I think I had the 3rd most bills signed, and we had a really robust not that we're competitive in our office or not, but we had a lot of really big bills signed, like 1705. We got a battery recycling bill signed. That has an effort. It's been a 20-year effort to get that done. I have really great staff, so we had a great bill package. So I don't know exactly what the bill package will look like this year because so far we're at I think 45 bills that we're looking at, and
the limit's 40.
Well, we're not there. There's no way we'll be doing anywhere close to that. But we want to just make sure that we're picking the best ones, right, and figuring out where we can make the most difference.
Wow. So everyone's coming to you with their great ideas.
Well,
huh?
Or we're coming up with some of our great ideas. A lot of ideas that I think are great, but we'll see what my staff thinks about that.
Any members who need some bills, go to Jacqui's office.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, awesome, Jacqui. Thanks so much for taking the time and talking with us. Very interesting stuff, and look forward to see what you do this year.
Well, I certainly appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Jacqui.